I wanted to say was that when I've had time to reflect on what you are talking about and really listening to that question, and I think about when you talk about anti-blackness and how that's someone said that's real, right? Colorism is real, that's also real in our own communities. When you think about how dark are you, and you talk about this idea about passing for not quite being black. Like I've got that my whole life. Like, what are you? People don't even know what they're like, what are you? And then they see me in the context of my five siblings, and we are along this continuum of every shade, right? From light to dark to, and I remember being a child, like not, not getting what other people were getting. And as an adult, I look back and think, oh, yes, because I remember folks saying, oh, don't go outside. It's too hot in the summer. You're going to get more black. And I remember thinking, like, and, like that reaction was like, what? It didn't make sense to me. But when I see folks commenting about that, and you hear that, I've heard from some of my Latina friends who said they were told that too. Don't go out. You're going to get too dark. And we had this conversation about what does that mean to be too dark? Too dark for what? And that opens up the conversations to, well, again, it always comes back to power, right? Who's treated differently because they're darker?
Right.
And right, how much power do I get because I'm lighter? And so having those conversations about really understanding racism not just being about um, color of skin, but the power that comes with the color of skin. And so I appreciate that that person raised that question, because I saw so much happening in the chat related to that, but it also prompted me to think about that, right? To talk about the acknowledgement that racism, in the context that that question was asked, is not just about outsiders, right,
Right.
viewing us differently. It's also how do we perceive ourselves, and then how do we affirm ourselves,
Mhm.
particularly when we're working with Black children and brown children. How do we help them affirm who they are? And I'm still puzzled by that question about differences. And it'll come back, that'll keep coming up in my mind about, is that word, using the word different, is that a bad thing? And how do we prevent it from being a bad thing? It's like using the word black. I tell folks I use that, and I use that openly and often, because to me that's power. Like that's affirming when I can say black without saying black, or I'm not sure, can we say black? To say yes, I am black, and I can say like, oh yes, I see these beautiful black children. Like there's power in that, and part of how we reclaim our power is in the language that we choose to use.
Mhm. Mhm. Nicole, is there anything that we haven't asked or that we haven't touched on that you think it's crucial for our listeners to take away from this conversation?
Um, Yes, and I love that this question just came up, because that was like perfect timing. This person said, "What about when white people are told that they're too white or they need to get sun?" So acknowledging that these conversations don't only happen in one direction; they happen in all these different ways, and that part of the way that we provide clarity about what we're talking about is when we start to move into that, right? Yes, we have differences, and yes, we're going to talk about different skin color. We're going to talk about different cultures. But then when we have that conversation about power, is when we really get into understanding why racism is such a negative thing. And to the person who asked that question about hearing those messages, I would also affirm that, right, in the classroom, you might hear this too. Oh, you need to get out and get some sun on your legs. Oh, you need to get out and whatever. And so you open up the door for everyone to participate in that conversation. So there's no feeling of, oh, I'm being excluded because I don't fit with that particular narrative. Now it's open for us as a community to talk about all the ways that we are talked about.
Mhm. Mhm.